Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're digging into something pretty significant that happened recently. Those U.S. military strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Probably saw the headlines.
Oh, yeah, big news.
Definitely. And the immediate story, the narrative pushed out, was all about success, mission accomplished. But we're going to peel back the layers a bit here. We've got, various sources, YouTube transcripts discussing official statements, intel reports, even a politician speaking, pretty frankly. And we want to unpack what really happened, or at least what the different accounts say happened. What was the public told versus what did the intelligence actually show? How did officials react when pushed? And maybe what does it all mean for figuring out what's true these days?
Right. That gap between the official story and, well, everything else.
Exactly. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The stated goal, right? As pitched by then President Trump.
Right.
Destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. Simple as that.
Seemed clear enough.
And then boom, right after the strikes, Trump declares victory. Total success. Claims the sites were destroyed.
But that narrative got tested pretty quick, didn't it?
Almost immediately.
Mm.
What do the reporters start asking?
Well, yeah, that's where it gets interesting. Skepticism surfaced fast. Jennifer Griffin, for example, brought up satellite photos. Photos showing, like, over a dozen trucks near the facilities just before the strikes. So her question was crucial. Was any of that highly enriched uranium actually moved before the bombs hit?
Ah, okay. A very pointed question.
Very. Directly challenging the total destruction idea.
So, faced with that kind of direct question, how did the officials handle it? You mentioned Pete Hegseth stood out.
Oh, he did. Our source material paints quite a picture, described him as the most defensive man in history.
Wow. That's quite the description.
Yeah. Apparently, when he was pressed on whether the uranium itself was destroyed, after he'd confidently talked about the B-2s and the mission, he got really agitated.
So.
The source says he seemed to lunge past this podium, like getting super angry at his former coworker, Griffin, somehow showed strength. But the assessment was it just made him look a little unhinged and a fool.
That kind of reaction is telling, isn't it?
It really is. It suggests maybe a lot of pressure when that official story starts getting holes poked in it, especially with something this high stakes.
Definitely. So, okay, that's the public-facing side. What about the intelligence, the stuff happening behind the scenes? What did that start showing?
Well, this is where the core contradiction really comes into view. According to reports like in the Financial Times, the initial intelligence assessments, the ones going to European governments, painted a very different picture.
Okay. How?
They indicated that Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile remained, quote, largely intact.
Largely intact, so not destroyed.
Not destroyed. And the key detail, the really crucial part, was that the intelligence suggested about 48 kilos of this uranium, the stuff enriched close to weapons grade.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually at the Ferdo facility when the attack happened.
Wait, so it wasn't even there?
Apparently it had been distributed, moved to various other locations beforehand.
Just like Griffin asked about with the trucks.
Exactly. So this isn't just about, how much damage did we do? It fundamentally undermines the total success narrative right from the start.
Wow. Okay. So intelligence is saying one thing, the public statement is another. How did the administration, specifically Trump, react when these kinds of reports started surfacing?
Oh, the reaction was swift and very public. Classic Trump style, really, on social media.
Oh, yes. Fake news.
You got it. Called out CNN, the New York Times. Disgusting and incompetent, some of the dumbest anchors in the business. Called them bad people with evil intentions. Even suggested they should be fired immediately.
For what? For reporting the intelligence?
For trying to, in his words, make this unbelievable victory into something less. So a really forceful defense of the official story. Attack the messengers.
Right. But it wasn't just anonymous intel sources or media reports questioning things, was it? We found mentions of actual political figures speaking out.
Correct. And that adds another layer entirely. Senator Lindsey Graham, for instance.
What did he say? He's usually pretty aligned, isn't he?
Often, yes. But here, he apparently stated quite bluntly that the U.S. has not made ourselves more safe, as Trump has said. In fact, we have made ourselves less safe.
Less safe? That's a big statement. Why?
His reasoning was pretty stark. He suggested that Iran might look at this and think, okay, without a nuclear weapon, the U.S. can just bomb us whenever they want.
So the deterrent isn't there.
Right. And therefore, Graham concluded, they'd likely try to build and enrich uranium as quickly as they can.
So the strikes could actually accelerate the program. The exact opposite of the intended effect.
That was his fear, a really significant potential strategic blowback.
Okay, so let's circle back to the damage itself. Even with the uranium potentially moved, what was hit, the officials still claimed obliteration at the sites, right?
They did. They were insistent. Phrases like obliterated at those 3 sites, and the site wasn't severely damaged or obliterated, it was. Strong language.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Well, yeah. There was also this acknowledgement, even from officials, that you can reconstitute the program.
Meaning rebuild it.
Exactly. So even if those specific buildings were hit hard, the capability, the knowledge isn't necessarily gone. As one official put it, the problem is not over.
Okay. And there was something else, wasn't there? A specific material mentioned in the sources.
Yes, that's right. A detail kind of buried in some reports. 900 pounds of polonium?
Polonium.
Yeah, a material sometimes linked to nuclear processes.
Right.
And the reports indicated this material wasn't found within the targeted sites.
Another piece that just doesn't quite fit the total obliteration picture.
Exactly. It just adds more complexity, more questions.
Okay, this is fascinating. But our dive into the sources didn't just stop at the military effectiveness, did it? There was this whole other controversy that blew up.
Oh, yeah. A completely different angle. It shifted from bombs and uranium to language and credit.
Right, and Pete Hegseth is back in the spotlight here, too.
He is indeed. So after the mission, Hegseth initially congratulated the boys. Just the boys.
Okay, and that caused a stir.
A significant one. The criticism, as laid out in the sources, was that this phrasing completely minimized, even erased, the contributions of women in the military involved in the operation.
Made them invisible, essentially.
That's the word used. And potentially part of a wider dehumanization by not acknowledging their role. The source also pointed out what it saw as hypocrisy.
How so?
Well, coming from a political side that had apparently been, quote, obsessed with gender before the election, you know, the whole keep the boys, and the girls rhetoric.
Right, I remember that.
And now suddenly it seemed okay to call girls boys when talking about military contributions. It struck some as inconsistent, to say the least.
Okay, that's a potent critique. How did Hegseth respond to that criticism? Did he address it?
He did. He defended his phrasing, said our boys and bombers is just a common turn of phrase.
Like an idiom.
Sort of. And he said he'd keep saying things like that, whether they're men or women.
Okay.
But he also did acknowledge women's roles specifically. The chairman mentioned a female bomber pilot. That's fantastic. She's fantastic. She's a hero. I want more female bomber pilots.
So a bit of both defense and acknowledgement.
Seems like it. But then he also pivoted, saying the obsession with race and gender in the department had changed priorities and that we don't do that anymore, implying his focus was different.
So a really complex situation all around. Military claims versus intel, political fallout, and even this whole debate about language and credit. Where does this leave us then? What's the takeaway from this deep dive, it feels like?
Well, it shows how messy reality can be behind the big headlines.
It really does. The immediate mission accomplished narrative rarely tells the whole story, does it?
Clearly not. We saw official claims of total success, almost immediately followed by contradictory intelligence, admissions of, let's say, less than total success, and these really public defensive reactions. Yeah. And that brings us to the final thought, maybe, for you listening. In a world absolutely swimming in information, what does it actually mean when those in positions of power react so vehemently against the very sources, journalists, intelligence agencies that are supposed to provide those checks and balances?
Right. How does that kind of attack impact your ability, our ability to figure out what's actually true?
And how much deeper do you personally need to dig beyond the headlines to feel like you're genuinely informed? It's something to think about.